pie recipe is fundamentally so simple, but it is one of the most delicious you'll ever eat. Even though most American apple pie fillings are really heavy in the warm spices, this one really lets the flavors of the apples sing and only uses a bit of brown butter, some lemon, and brown sugar to flavor the filling. And if you're new here, I'm Maggie. This is No Frills Kitchen, where I teach you how to cook with confidence with nothing fancy required.
To start off, let's brown our butter. You can skip this step, but the nutty flavor brown butter adds to the pie is super craveable, and I highly recommend taking the extra minute to brown your butter rather than simply melting it. To brown the butter, add it to a small saucepan. It can be easier to use a light colored pan so you can gauge the level of browning. And set the butter over medium-high heat. Once it has melted, keep it on the heat until it begins to foam up. Once the foam begins to subside, you'll notice some light browning appear on the bottom of the pan and a nutty aroma arise. Remove the pan from the heat when you notice this happen, as it can burn really quickly after that. We'll prep our apples now. To begin, you're going to want to remove the stems and peel the apples. I like to make a little game for myself and try to get the peel off all in one piece. Let me know in the comments if you have any little games you like to play to make menial kitchen tasks a little bit more interesting. Now, to slice and core the apples, you have a few different options. If you have only a chef's knife, you can simply cut around the core like this and then thinly slice the apple pieces with your knife. Personally, I prefer to use an apple corer, but I do understand this is a single-use item that isn't really a necessity in the kitchen. So you can remove the core with a corer and then thinly slice them on a mandolin like this. My mandolin isn't the fanciest, so I actually find it quickest to use the corer to remove the cores and then cut the apples into thin slices with my knife. Add all of your apple slices to a large bowl. You're going to need about 8 to 10 baking apples here. Many apple pie recipes call for Granny Smith apples, but I really like using Pink Lady apples here. I don't add a lot of sugar to the filling, so it works really well with a sweeter apple. Now it's time to mix your filling. Add the zest of 1 lemon. I actually have Meyer lemons here, which add a really nice floral flavor to the pie, but a regular grocery store run-of-the-mill lemon works just fine, and it's actually what I developed the recipe with. Go ahead and add a couple of tablespoons of lemon juice to the apples as well. Then add a bit of flour to act as a thickener and some dark brown sugar for sweetness. Pour over your browned butter and mix to combine. You're going to want a very large bowl because honestly, this bowl is a little bit too small for the volume of apples, and it is the largest bowl I have. The larger the bowl, the easier it is to ensure everything is mixed thoroughly. Once everything is mixed, transfer the filling to the fridge while you roll out the pastry. I really recommend you make your own pie crust for this recipe. My recipe is linked in the description, and I've also made a video about my method if you want to watch that. It's insanely easy to make your own, and it elevates the pie so much. Roll out the bottom crust first, keeping the other round in the fridge until you're ready to use it. Dust a work surface with flour and use a rolling pin to roll out your dough so that it has an even thickness and is about 12 inches in diameter. Use as little flour as possible when rolling out your pastry, and make sure to pick it up, flip it over, and move it around periodically to ensure nothing is sticking. I like to use my pie dish to measure the dough size. I just want to make sure it's a bit wider than the dish itself to ensure I have a bit of overhang. By the way, to ensure that I keep my crust as chilled as possible, which is essential to a super flaky crust, I also like to store my pie dish in the freezer until I'm ready to use it. Transfer the crust to your pie plate. I like to use metal because of the heat conductivity, but many bakers prefer glass as it allows you to easily gauge how brown your bottom crust is becoming when it's baked. Allow for a bit of overhang in the dough. This will help with crimping later, and then transfer the pie plate to the freezer for about 10 minutes. While the bottom crust is chilling, roll out your top crust to the same specifications. Transfer that to a parchment-lined baking sheet and then refrigerate it until you're ready to use it. Remove the bottom crust from the freezer and the filling from the fridge. Transfer the filling to the pie crust, ensuring that the apples are evenly distributed and that there aren't any large gaps on the bottom. There's a lot of filling here, so it will mound above the edges. The apples break down a bit as they cook, but I also like the look of a mounded pie rather than a completely flat one. Just ensure that no apple slices are hanging over the edge of your pie plate because that's going to make it really tough to crimp the crust. Remove your top crust from the fridge and gently place it over the apples, pressing lightly to ensure even coverage. Then use some scissors to trim the excess pastry from the edges and then crimp any way you desire. You can go simple with the tines of a fork or opt for something more fancy like I'm doing. After this, refrigerate your pie for another 10 minutes. All of this refrigeration has a few objectives. First, it keeps the pastry chilled, which will ensure optimal flakiness when baked. And second, it relaxes the gluten in the crust and prevents it from contracting or slumping while it's baking. Take the pie from the refrigerator and brush it lightly with a beaten egg. This will ensure that it comes out golden and burnished. Then sprinkle the crust with some demerara sugar. Now, all that's left is to cut a few steam vents in the pastry. Transfer the pie to a baking sheet and then bake at 350 F 180 C for about an hour to an hour and 15 minutes. You'll know it's done when the crust is very golden and the pie is super fragrant. Make sure you allow the pie to cool completely before serving, at least 4 hours. Waiting for the pie to cool is torturous but necessary. Even 4 hours later, this slice was still a little bit juicier than I would have liked, but the first slice is never the prettiest and it still tastes amazing. If you liked this recipe, make sure to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss my next videos.